Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation with Biraci in Yawanawa, Brazil. He currently is in the sacred village of the Yawanawas, deep in the jungle, in the Amazonian jungle of Brazil. And we've been trying for a few days to make this work in the best way possible. Due to some connectivity issues, we have not been able to do this live with him. So we're going to be showing another conversation we have had with him, and I'll be translating that conversation. And in the near future, we're going to include the conversation that was supposed to be today. He's currently uploading a video from the heart of the Amazon and doing his best with the help of his daughters. He basically disconnected the whole village to try to make this happen with us. So we will be adding that to the digital library of the conference. While that doesn't happen, we are going to use this pre-recording. Many blessings to you all. Biraci Yawanawa, Brasil, is one of the most important indigenous leaders that is alive, especially for the Brazilian indigenous. He was a key element on the battle for the indigenous rights. The Yawanawa people were the first indigenous peoples of Brazil to have their reservation protected by the government. And they were also in the forefront of their cultural revival, creating the Yawa Festival about 2 decades ago. That was their way to reconnect with their traditions and with their language and with what better way to learn from their elders than sitting around the fire with their songs, their prayers, and their ceremonies. So it's always an honor to talk to Biraci, to Nishiwaka, as his Yawanawa name. And again, he's an iconic indigenous leader, always on the forefront of the indigenous rights battles. And so here he will be sharing a bit of the Yawanawa history, his own history, and we'll be translating from here on this pre-recorded video. Blessings.
Como você já me apresentou, mas me chama Biraci Brasil em português, Nishiwaka. Eu venho da família tradicional hereditária de chefe do povo Yawanawa.
As you already have introduced myself, my name is Biraci Nishiwaka Brasil Yawanawa, and I come from a lineage of leaders of the Yawanawa peoples.
Eu conheci, até meus 9 anos de idade, o meu avô que fez o contato com o primeiro homem branco.
I've met until I was 9 years old with my grandparents who made the first contact with the white people.
Não faz muito tempo, vocês estão me vendo aqui a minha cara, né? O meu avô, eu vi ele, ouvi ele que fez o contato com o homem branco.
As you can see, it hasn't been that long. As you can see, I'm here, and I met my grandfather, who had that first contact with white people. So that hasn't happened such a long time ago.
E eu sou filho de uma das suas filhas, uma filha querida, uma filha amiga, né? E minha mãe teve mais 2 filhos mais velhos do que eu. Ele, um com 6 anos, outro com recém-nascido, minha mãe perdeu.
I am the son of his daughter, a very sweet, dear daughter. And my mother also had other 2 children that were older than me. And the 2 of them passed away. One was 6 years old, and the other one was a newborn.
Meu avô era um líder espiritual, um grande xamã, um grande pajé. Falou para minha mãe que minha mãe não criaria um filho homem.
My grandfather was a very important spiritual leader, pajé, a healer, and he told my mother that he would not raise a son.
Para ela criar um filho homem, tinha que doar esse seu próximo filho homem para alguma das suas irmãs criar. Dinheiro mais...
And that she would have to donate, to give away this son, so one of her sisters could raise him.
Minhas 3 irmãs antes de mim, depois eu vim ao mundo. E a minha mãe chamou seus pais, meus avós, e me deram para os meus avós.
So before me, there were also 3 sisters, and when I was born as a little boy, my mother called in her parents, my grandparents, and gave me away to my grandparents so they could raise me.
Então, desde que eu nasci, eu fui criado com meus avós. Meus avós não falavam português. A primeira minha língua materna, Yawanawa. Perdi minha mãe com 3 anos.
So, since I was born, I was raised by my grandparents, and they didn't speak any Portuguese. So I was raised with my mother language, with the Yawanawa language. And my mother passed away when I was about 3 years old.
Já não morava com ela, não soube de quase nada com essa idade. Continuei morando com a minha avó. Quando eu tinha 9 anos, perdi meu avô, o líder, né, o nosso patriarca.
And when she passed away, I didn't have much contact since I was being raised by my grandparents, and that's how I grew up. And when I was about 9 years old, my grandfather, which was the chief, the cacique, the leader of the Yawanawas, passed away.
E continuei morando com minha avó até meus 15 anos. E depois eu tive que trabalhar.
So I continued living with my grandmother until I was 15 years old. But when I reached that age, I had to go work.
Para os patrões seringalista. Na época, a economia da Amazônia era estação de borracha. Eu, adolescente, tive que cortar seringa para me comprar roupa, para me comprar um chinelo, para me comprar alguma coisa, porque andar descalço, pelado, no meio da sociedade branca, era visto com ignorância, como ridículos, como preguiçosos.
So at that age, I started working for the rubber tappers, which was the main economy in the Amazon at that time. And as a teenager, I started working to make money so I could have what to wear, and I could buy my sandals. And because it was not accepted by society, by the white people society, someone to be naked or barefoot, and that was seen as someone that's lazy, that's ignorant, um, and there was a lot of lack of respect for the indigenous ways.
Não trabalham, não compram. E eu tive que trabalhar até meus 17 anos, 16, 17, e eu achei, assim, cada vez nossa situação ficava mais difícil aqui. Né? Nós não tínhamos uma terra reconhecida, nós não era reconhecido como um povo indígena, somos caboclos dos seringueiros.
So I worked until I was working until I was 16, 17 years old with the rubber tappers, and I was observing how our conditions were just getting worse, and that our land were not recognized, and we were not recognized as people, and the mixed caboclos also were everything was getting very mixed and unclear.
E aí o meu tio, após a passagem do seu pai, do meu avô, meu tio Raimundo, que mais tarde se tornaria o meu sogro, né, nos mandou para nós estudar na cidade. Eu não conhecia a cidade, nunca andei na cidade, não sabia como era esse mundo da cidade. E eu saí com meu primo da minha idade, com o filho dele, com o Salles, o Bruná, fomos para a capital, em Rio Branco.
So my uncle Raimundo, who became the leader after the passage of my grandfather, decided to send me and my cousin to the city. And we had never experienced that. We didn't know how the cities were. We had grown in the forest. So there we were being sent to the city, to this new world, to this completely new experience.
E fomos estudar, não conhecia nada, dominar muito pouco português, muito menos de como, né, me virar ali na cidade.
So we went to study and to learn this new culture, which was very challenging because we barely spoke Portuguese. Imagine understanding all the ways of the white people. So we went to the city to learn.
Na época, o delegado regional da FUNAI, chamado Delegados Regionais da FUNAI, no início da década de 80, quando eu fui em fevereiro de 80, e não fui recebido porque eu não tinha uma característica igualzinho dos índios, como eles identificavam como seria índio.
So we were sent, and at that time, the director of FUNAI, which is like the Indigenous government agency of support to the Indigenous, didn't receive me because I don't really have the characteristics of an Indigenous as they saw that Indigenous were. So we were not seen as Indigenous by this organization.
E não fui recebido pela FUNAI, tive que trabalhar como servente de pedreiro, de carpinteiro, não sabia nada de trabalhar com pedra, com carpintaria, mas eu ia auxiliar para me comprar, né, meu caderno, meu livro, uma roupinha para me vestir.
So since I was not received by by FUNAI, I had just started working, and I didn't know much. So I was really like starting from nowhere, and I started working in constructions, in woodworking, and just like learning so I could buy my notebooks to study, to cover the basics.
Né, e ficar ali, sobreviver. Foi uma história muito difícil da minha vida. Eu tinha um sonho de fazer antropologia, né? Eu queria ser um antropólogo. Depois de ser antropólogo, eu achava que eu queria fazer direito, né? Para me lutar pela causa dos povos indígenas da minha família.
So that beginning was a big challenge for me, and I've always had the dream to become an anthropologist and also to study law, so I could provide a proper support for the indigenous causes.
Mas, assim, a falta de pessoas, de líderes indígenas, né, para fazer à frente de uma luta dos povos indígenas, eu muito bem cedo me ingressei na organização dos povos indígenas na Amazônia, e especialmente no Acre.
And there was a lack of indigenous leaderships on the forefront of the fight for the indigenous rights. So I was very young when I entered that battle, that movement, to fight for indigenous rights in the Amazon and specifically in Acre.
80 eu cheguei em 80, 82, a ONG indigenista, a Comissão Pro Índio do Acre, Conselho Indigenista Missionário do Acre, organizaram a primeira Assembleia dos Povos Indígenas no Acre.
And at that point, an NGO, which was the Missionary Council, Indigenous Council, organized one of the first gathering of different indigenous traditions.
E eu, jovem estudante, eu fui lá visitar e encontrei uns 12 líderes, que nenhum deles está mais aqui nessa terra com nós.
And back then I was a young man, a student, and I went there, and there I had the opportunity to meet 12 leaders, from which none of them are still here with us on Earth.
Mas estavam em espírito, estavam lá presentes. Eu tinha 18 anos, e eles me falaram: meu filho, você é de onde? Eu falei: sou Yawanawa, do Alto Gregório, estou aqui em Rio Branco. Ele falou: senta aqui nessa mesa e ajuda a conduzir, né, essa assembleia.
But they are here still spiritually, energetically. And when I arrived there, I was only 18 years old, and they asked me, my son, who are you? Where are you from? And I said, I'm a Yawanawa, and I'm from Alto Gregorio. So they asked me to sit with them in the table and help them to conduct this meeting.
E naquele momento, eu senti que eu fui chamado pelas lideranças tradicionais de história do Acre para me assumir um novo destino, lutar pelos direitos dos povos indígenas.
And in that moment, I felt that I was called by the traditional indigenous leadership to step in at that moment on this path, to be fighting for indigenous rights and to be part of that leadership in a major way.
E eu paro de estudar e começo a organizar o movimento indígena acreano. 84, eu sabia da existência já da criação do movimento indígena brasileiro. O Ailton Krenak era o primeiro coordenador do movimento indígena do Brasil.
So I stopped studying, and at that point in 1984, I already knew about the National Indigenous Movement, having Ailton Krenak as one of their main leaders.
Amigo meu, um antropólogo, me falou que conhecia ele e me deu o telefone dele, de Rio Branco, na capital do Acre. Eu ligo para São Paulo e falo com Ailton pela primeira vez.
And one of my friends, an anthropologist, told me he had Karenak's number, and he shared with me his phone number, and I called him from Rio Branco here in Acre to São Paulo so we could talk.
O Ailton me convida a ir a São Paulo. 2 anos depois, eu desço nesse arranha-céu, nessa cidade enorme do mundo.
Ailton invited me to come to São Paulo to meet him, and 2 years later, I make that journey to the city with skyscrapers, that giant city, very unique, very large.
Eu chego em São Paulo e começo a conversar com a Ailton. E a gente organiza a primeira Assembleia dos Povos Indígenas, em 84. E eu sou aclamado novo coordenador do movimento indígena.
I arrived there, and with Ailton, we organized the first conference, the first meeting of the Indigenous movement. And at that meeting, I was assigned as the coordinator of the Indigenous movement of Brazil.
Do Acre. E começo a lutar pelos direitos dos povos indígenas, aliado, né, com a coordenação nacional. E eu fiquei uma espécie de um representante, um embaixador do movimento indígena brasileiro, convidado pelo Ailton, muito jovem, querendo descobrir o mundo. Ailton fez eu viajar, participar, né, de encontros nacionais e internacionais.
And at that moment that I became the coordinator of Acre, very aligned with the national movement, as a young man, very curious that wanted to travel and learn, I started doing this work with Ailton and like really fighting for our rights.
Eu me lembro que em 84 mesmo, nós, primeira vez na história do Brasil, 3 jovens indígenas participam da Conferência Mundial dos Povos Indígenas, que estava sendo organizado na cidade do Panamá.
And in 84, for the first time, these 3 young indigenous men, we went to Panama to participate of this conference of the indigenous movement, representing the Brazilian indigenous peoples.
E o Brasil, pela primeira vez, manda uma delegação oficialmente como Organização Nacional dos Índios Brasileiros.
And for the first time, Brazil sent a group, a delegation, to represent the indigenous peoples of Brazil.
E estava eu ali, e o Ailton Krenak, e o Apolônio Chopó, de Sergipe, que fez a passagem o ano passado, meu saudoso irmão, e começa a história dos povos indígenas.
And there we were, myself, Ailton Krenak, Apollo from Sergipe that passed away last year. So there we were, organized for the first time, representing the Brazilian indigenous.
Até todo final da década de 80, a década de 90, eu fui convidado para me trabalhar na FUNAI, e eu fiz esse papel.
And so until the end of the 80s, the 90s, I was invited to work at FUNAI, the Indigenous National Foundation, to do that work, to do that role.
Como sempre, a gente achava que ocupar um cargo oficial no governo poderia facilitar, né, diminuir essa burocracia e fortalecer os povos indígenas.
And we thought that by having an official role within the government, that could strengthen our position, and it could help us and assist us to fight for our rights and create a better dialogue with the government.
Não sabíamos nós. Hoje eu sou consciente que são instituições públicas do governo brasileiro e não dos povos indígenas.
Little did we know that these are public institutions connected to the government, and they do not really represent the indigenous.
E que nós estamos ali para servir o Estado e não nossos povos.
And we were
Eu
there
não
to
quis,
serve the government, the state, and not our peoples.
mas em 92, convidado pela minha família, eu retorno à minha aldeia. E meu tio, no então, o sucessor do seu pai, do meu avô, me convida: meu filho, vem nos ajudar, cuidar da nossa família.
And in 92, I'm invited by my family, by my uncle, the successor of my grandfather as the leader, and he invited me back and asked me to help, to assist, to lead our people.
E eu peço minha demissão da FUNAI, né, sem ônus, e volto em 92, e constrói uma nova aldeia, e dou o nome da Nova Esperança.
So I quit my work at FUNAI in 92 without any benefits, and I returned to my village and returned to my people and started the construction of a new village called Nova Esperança, the New Hope Village.
Né? A maior parte da minha família trabalhava para os patrões seringalistas ainda, mesmo quando é com a terra demarcada. Outra das minhas famílias, na busca da melhoria de vida da sua família, estão trabalhando nas fazendas próximas da terra indígena.
And most of my family still worked to the rubber tappers back then, even though we had our lands defined, our reservation defined. And a lot of other family members worked for the farmers surrounding our lands in search for a better quality of life.
Outra minha família foram morar em outras aldeias, porque era difícil aqui.
Other family members moved to other indigenous villages because life here was really hard, really tough.
E eu fiz essa revolução de trazer minha família de volta.
I created this revolution of bringing my family back together.
Para poder isso acontecer também, em década de 80, em 87, eu tive que me rebeliar contra as missões protestantes em terras indígenas da Amazônia.
To be able to manifest that back in 87, I revolted against the missionaries, the missionary groups that were here in the Amazon trying to control our peoples and influence our peoples.
Eu fui o primeiro líder do Brasil me rebeliar contra os protestantes.
I was the first leader, or the first Brazilian leader to go against the Protestants.
Expulsei a missão Novas Tribos do Brasil, da nossa terra, e encorajou outros povos indígenas, outros líderes, expulsarem de outros territórios da Amazônia.
So I kicked out the missionaries out of our lands here, and that was an inspiration to other indigenous peoples, to other leaders to do the same and free themselves from the missionary influence.
E aí nós estávamos livres dos seringalistas e do protestante.
So then we were free from the rubber tappers and the missionaries.
Vamos fazer o quê? Há 3 décadas e pouco, nós não praticávamos nossas tradições, nem nossos costumes tradicionais.
And now what could we do? You know, for almost 3 decades, we were not allowed to practice our traditions, to follow our medicines and just follow our ancestral knowledge.
E eu comecei a perguntar para os nossos mais velhos, porque como eram os líderes tradicionais Yawanawa.
So I started asking to our elders, how were the traditional Yawanawa leaders?
Com a benção do Criador, ainda nós tínhamos 2 pajés importantes, que viveram mais de
With the
século, que era o pajé Yawa e o pajé Tatá.
with the with the blessings of Creator, we still had two major spiritual leaders, pajés, which were Pajé Yawa and Pajé Tata, and they were still alive within us.
E eu convidei eles, empoderei eles. Vocês são os maiores homens e mais importantes da nossa história agora.
So I invited them and empowered them, and told them that they are the most important and powerful leaders of our people, of our tradition right now.
Nos ajuda, nos orienta, nos direciona. Vocês sabem do caminho do retorno para a nossa casa ancestral, a nossa casa tradicional.
Please help us, please guide us, please direct us. You are the ones that know the directions to our traditional home, to our ancestral home, to our roots.
Eles falaram sim. E eles, durante esse tempo da evangelização, eles também foram discriminados pelos próprios Yawanawa.
And they said yes. But also during those years that we were influenced by external powers, they were not heard, they were not listened by the other Yawanawas. They were undervalued by the other Yawanawas.
E eles começam a me orientar dizendo que todos os líderes de Yawanawa foram líderes espirituais. Como é que você vai ser líder de um povo onde tem pessoas sábios, pajés, pessoas que conhecem plantas, guerreiros, grande caçador? Você vai brincar de chefe no meio de tanta gente sábia?
So they started guiding me. And one of the first things they shared is that all the Yawanawa leaders, they were also very strong spiritual leaders. And how can you want to be a leader in between other powerful pajés and powerful hunters without representing that? How can you lead people that are superior to you?
Portanto, todos os nossos líderes foram líderes espirituais. E como é ser líderes espirituais? Há 2 caminhos, das plantas e dos animais.
So all of our leaders were spiritual leaders that had knowledge of the plants, of nature, and there was always the paths of the plants and of the animals, of nature in general.
Das nossas dietas sagradas, com a jiboia, a nossa dieta sagrada como cá, se fazer um juramento e ficar isolado 1 ano, para que os espíritos da nossa ancestralidade e dessas plantas e dos animais te orientam, te ensinam e te conduzam. Assim você vai ter entendimento para dirigir seu povo.
And the path of the sacred diets, the diet of the Boa, the diet of Muka, as well as the oath and retiring in the forest for a year. So the spirits of these plants and these animals can guide you and teach you towards the ancestral knowledge and wisdom of our people.
Mas eu era muito jovem, recém-casado, casamento com minhas pessoas amadas, né, que hoje é minha esposa, para o Dani, muito apaixonado, e tinha que deixar por um ano.
But at that moment, I was a young man and I had just been married as a young man to someone that I love very much, and I had so much passion at that moment by my wife Putani, which we're still married. And at that moment, it just seemed so challenging to abandon all of that, to retire myself for a year in the forest.
Nesse isolamento. Pensei durante 8 anos. Mas tudo isso me impulsava, eu tinha que fazer isso. Assim fiz.
I thought about it for 8 years, about this need to isolate myself, but everything was guiding me, everything was pointing towards the necessity to do that. So I decided to do it.
Fiz a dieta, já depois de mais de 60 anos que um homem da nossa história não tinha feito mais uma dieta dessa.
I did the diet, and I was the first one in over 60 years of the Yawanawa people that made that oath and did that diet.
E eu, depois de viajar o mundo, organizar o movimento indígena no Brasil, me recolho para minha casa e me recolho para minha essência.
So after traveling the world, battling for the indigenous rights, for the indigenous movement, I finally returned home, returned to my essence.
E me reencontrei novamente. Trouxe de volta o nosso espírito, que foram negados pelo nosso coração, do poder, do contato e dos protestantes.
And I re-encountered myself and with our spiritual path and our heart and all these connections that were denied for so many years by external forces such as the missionaries.
Eu fiquei 10 anos sem sair mais para fora do Brasil, só na minha aldeia, criando no meu coração uma força de conduzir minha família. Daí nasce a necessidade de falar nossa língua, a necessidade de fazer nossos rituais, de nossos cantos, trazer nossos cantos de novo.
I didn't leave Brazil for another 10 years, really focusing my energy and my thoughts and prayers into how to reconnect and revive our culture, and understanding what was the best ways and the best path to do that, and to reconnect and revive like our songs, our prayers, and our traditions.
De nós usar nossas plantas, nossas medicinas, que antes do homem branco, nossa família adoecia, nós curava. De aprender a curar nossa família com rezas espirituais.
Of how to use our sacred plants and medicines that before the contact with white men, we cured all of our diseases, of how to use our prayers to cure and treat any diseases, any issues that we had.
Encontrei uma nova missão na minha vida e retomo nossos trabalhos de voltar para casa, voltar para a nossa ancestralidade, Criei o Festival Yawa com o meu povo, que trouxe autoestima aos povos indígenas no Acre e na Amazônia, no Brasil e no mundo.
So I found a new life mission to return home, to reconnect with our ancestral knowledge. And through this mission, I created the festival Yawa, which was revolutionary, and it really helped with the self-esteem of the Brazilian indigenous people, as well as like global indigenous self-esteem, by celebrating and honoring our traditional cultures.
Eu recebi pessoas, meus parentes, a solidariedade dos meus parentes, lá do norte do Canadá.
I've
Os Odigo
received
do Canadá.
I received solidarity and support from relatives all the way from north of Canada.
Como os Mapuche do Chile, de norte a sul desse continente.
As well as the Mapuches from Chile, from north to south of this continent.
E eu continuei meus trabalhos, depois voltei à minha casa depois de um ano. Vi que não era mais esse meu caminho de fazer essa política mais externa. Como dizia os meus tios, se eu não curei a minha casa, como é que eu vou curar a casa dos outros?
So I continued this internal work, and with time I saw that it wasn't anymore my path to be doing this external politics work, because as my uncles and aunts told me, how can you want to cure and heal other people's homes if you're not taking good care of your own home, of your internal affairs?
Eu preciso arrumar a minha casa. Eu decidi ficar no meu povo, na minha aldeia, e seguir meu caminho espiritual. É o que estou fazendo hoje e para sempre.
So I saw that I had to tidy up my home and clean up and take good care of my Yawanawa peoples and our homes and our ancestrality and our spirituality. And this is the work that I do these days.
Né, de levar a minha família, de empoderar as mulheres, os conhecimentos espirituais, os trabalhos espirituais, os rituais espirituais, isso eram feitos só pelos homens, e poucos homens. Os jovens não participavam, nem as mulheres.
So now I'm committed to help and support my family, especially empowering women, that traditionally women were not part of the Yawanawa spirituality. Traditionally, not it was only the elders, and no young people or women were part of the ceremonies. So that's also been part of our work, to empower the different generations and genders.
Nesse tempo, nesse século XXI, essa necessidade de recrutar mais pessoas para esse conhecimento ancestral. Eu sou uma das primeiras lideranças indígenas do meu povo, empodero o feminino.
And on this century, on the 21st century, we're living a different paradigm, a different reality, and our ways need to reflect that. So we've been empowering the young generations and the women as part of that work.
No mundo espiritual. E estamos, assim, trabalhando, jovens. E vocês, como me convidaram para fazer essa live hoje, dessa forma, pessoas como vocês, de vários lugares do Brasil e do mundo, vieram nos visitar, vieram nos solidarizar.
And through this inclusion in our spiritual work, as well as you that have invited us for this conversation, for this live today, including us into this dialogue, have opened to many people to learn more about us and come visit us and work with us.
E começaram a se pintar com nossos urucum, com genipapo. Pegaram a nossa mão dançando num terreiro, nossos cantos ancestrais. Falei, olha, eles gostam da gente. Eles acham bonito. Por que no passado eles falaram que isso era do demônio? Essa era diabólico? E isso traz uma autoestima na família. E nós começamos um novo momento.
So this integration and this inclusivity really changed our perspective, because we started receiving outsiders into our village, and everyone wanted to paint the traditional way like we do, and people wanted to hold hands with us and dance and celebrate our traditions and our culture. And we started looking at that and realizing that people really love what we do and how we are. And even though in the past people call that as something from the demons, from something like unholy, but we see the change of that, and we now see the value, and that really helps the self-esteem of the whole family.
De reconstrução da nossa casa. Esse é um pouco da história. São 57 anos de história.
Sharing of Nishiwaka, and be his to close this moment, this session. We will be providing online, when the whole digital library of this conference, the new recording that Nishiwaka did for us today, that's still being uploaded through the internet all the way from the heart of the Amazon, especially to us. And I thank you. Thanks everyone for joining in this moment and this sharing of a little bit of the Yawanawa culture. I highly recommend for you to dive deeper into these teachings of love and respect and forgiveness that they have. They are very, very beautiful people.
Eu estou muito feliz. Agora já estou mais bem, estava um pouco mais nervoso, né? E também não era isso,
Claro.
né? Eu estava...
here we go. Glauber is going to be sharing with us this prayer.
Para você poder falar, passa um rapézinho, né, para pedir a benção. Eu estou muito feliz. Agora já estou mais bem, estava um pouco mais nervoso, né? E também não era isso, né? Passei um rapé, como sempre, nossos ancestrais falam, para você poder falar, passa um rapézinho, né, para pedir a benção, para que nossos guias espirituais falam através da minha boca, do meu coração, com as palavras divinas.
So Nishiwaka was saying that he was anxious a little bit and that he used some rapés recommended by the elders and their traditions, which they always do before long conversations. It's a really amazing practice. And now he's feeling a little relaxed, and now he's going to share with us this prayer.
Espirituais falam através da minha boca, do meu coração, com as palavras divinas, com as palavras de amor. Então eu tinha feito a minha cerimônia. E eu escutar meu filho, me pediu, pai, está na hora. E eu cheguei aqui meio mariano, né? Então foi um pouco disso. E eu tenho uma cerimônia daqui a uma meia hora, com a ayahuasca, minha missão. Eu quero deixar aqui para vocês, né? Eu não sei quanto tempo ainda tenho para mim, a gente falar, mas eu queria, assim, pedir desculpa a todos, né, para mim poder me retirar, mas quero deixar aqui um canto, o canto da paz, o canto do amor, o canto da criação.
So I'm sorry. This moment I came from a ceremony, and we have an ayahuasca ceremony in a little bit, but I want to leave you with a song, a chant of creation, a chant of peace.
Kanaron chirinte Kanaron chirinte Mato no ma no ma Mato no ma Mato no ma no ma Mato no ma Anarum, anarum, anarum chirite. Anarum chirite. Chirite. No mahe mahe, no mahe, no mahe mahe, no mahe. Anarum chirite. Anarum chirite. Chirite. Me yo 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 yo, me yo yo yo, me yo 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 yo, me yo yo yo. Wa me ne re wa re wa, wa me ne re wa, wa me ne re wa re wa, wa me ne re wa, hey. Kanarum, kanarum, kanarum chirite. Kanarum chirite. Chirite. Mato no ma no ma, mato no ma, mato no ma no ma, mato no ma.
Hush, hush. Beautiful, beautiful song. I wish I had the time to explain a little bit what it means, but we're coming to an end of our session. Thank you so much, everyone that joined us.